Ask any long-haul driver about I-40 through New Mexico and Arizona at 2 in the morning, and you'll get one of two reactions. Either they change the subject, or they get quiet for a second, and then they tell you something they've never put on camera before. This isn't a ghost story video. It's about what actually happens to a driver's mind and body after 16 hours behind the wheel, alone, on one of the emptiest stretches of interstate in the country, and why most drivers would rather not talk about it at all. When truckers say I-40 at night, they're usually talking about one specific run, somewhere between Gallup, New Mexico, and Kingman, Arizona, over 300 miles where towns thin out, cell service drops in and out, and for long sections there's nothing but desert on both sides of the road. It's a legal, well-traveled freight corridor. Nothing about it is off-limits or secret. In daylight, it's just another interstate. RVs, tourists heading to the Grand Canyon, families on their way to Vegas. But somewhere after midnight, that same road empties out almost completely, and the character of the drive changes entirely. It's one of the loneliest drives in the lower 48, and loneliness at highway speed does something to people that most non-drivers never experience. There's a reason dispatchers who've never driven the route themselves don't fully understand why some drivers ask to avoid this leg on nights when they're already running low on sleep. Here's the part most drivers won't say out loud. After 12 to 14 hours awake, especially deep into a night shift, the brain starts doing something called highway hypnosis, and in more extreme fatigue cases, drivers report hypnagogic hallucinations, brief, dreamlike images that intrude while you're still technically awake. This is documented in sleep research, not trucking folklore. Truckers describe seeing shapes at the tree line that aren't there, movement in the mirrors when nothing's behind them, sometimes a figure standing on the shoulder that vanishes by the time they pass. Part of what makes this stretch specifically notorious is the monotony. The road barely curves for miles. There are no city lights breaking up the horizon, no real landmarks to anchor your attention. Sleep researchers have long pointed out that flat, repetitive environments like this are exactly the conditions where the brain starts to fill in the scenery, and headlights on an empty road can trick tired eyes into constructing shapes that simply aren't there. It's not that drivers think they saw a ghost. It's that admitting, "I might have hallucinated because I was too tired to be driving," isn't something you say to your dispatcher or your logbook. There's a real professional cost to that admission. So most drivers just quietly keep it to themselves and push on to the next stop. Now, separate from fatigue, there are things on this stretch that are completely real, and drivers talk about even less. Cell dead zones mean a breakdown at 3 a.m. can leave you stranded for hours before anyone even knows. For a driver alone in freezing desert night air, that's not a spooky detail. That's a genuine safety gap. And it's one of the real reasons experienced drivers top off fuel and check their trucks obsessively before entering this stretch. Wildlife is another factor most outsiders underestimate. Elk and cattle wander onto the interstate here more often than people realize, and hitting a 700-pound animal at highway speed can total a truck and seriously injure a driver. Local reports over the years have flagged this corridor specifically as a higher risk zone for large animal collisions, which is part of why some drivers slow down well below the limit once the sun goes down, no matter how far behind schedule they are. Then there's the stretch where drivers report following distance issues. A set of headlights that seems to pace them for miles without ever passing. Experienced drivers will tell you this is almost always mundane. Another tired trucker running the same speed limit, or someone conserving fuel by drafting. But it unsettles newer drivers enough that many of them will pull into a lit truck stop just to lose the vehicle behind them and reset. None of this needs embellishment. The real risks on this stretch, isolation, fatigue, and wildlife, are the actual reason experienced drivers treat this run differently than daytime miles, regardless of what else they might think they saw. So why the silence? Talk to enough drivers and it comes down to two things. First, nobody wants to sound unreliable. If you tell your carrier you saw something strange on shift, the assumption is fatigue, and fatigue write-ups follow you. They can affect dispatch assignments, insurance reviews, even future job prospects. So drivers learn early to keep those stories out of anything official. Second, there's an unspoken code among drivers. Everyone's had a weird night out there, but talking about it too much makes you the guy who can't handle nights. And that reputation costs you the better-paying, more desirable runs, the ones dispatchers hand out to drivers they trust to handle anything without complaint. So the stories stay in truck stops, over coffee, between people who already trust each other. Not on dash cams, not in incident reports, and definitely not to a new hire's face. It's an oral tradition passed quietly between drivers who've earned each other's trust, which is exactly why so few of these stories ever make it onto camera at all. The drivers who've run this stretch for years aren't superstitious about it. They're just disciplined. They plan fuel and rest stops before the dead zone starts, not during it, so they're never stuck without options in the middle of nowhere. They treat any presence in the mirrors as a fatigue signal rather than a threat, and they'll pull off and rest rather than push through on willpower alone. Many won't run this leg past hour 11 of a shift if they can help it, hours of service regulations allowing, treating that as their own personal cutoff, tighter than what the law technically requires. Some carry a simple routine: bright cab lighting before entering the dead zone, a check-in call to dispatch or family right before service drops, and a hard rule about pulling into the next lit lot the moment anything feels off. No debate, no pushing through just to save 20 minutes. It's not mystical, it's just experience talking, the kind that doesn't show up in a training manual, only in the stories drivers tell each other and almost nobody else. And if this all sounds oddly specific to one road, it isn't really. Drivers tell almost identical stories about stretches of I-70 through eastern Utah, I-15 through the Nevada desert, and long hauls across West Texas on I-10. Different highway numbers, same conditions: empty road, dead cell zones, and hour after hour of nothing to look at but your own headlights. I-40 just happens to be one of the most driven freight corridors in the country, which means more drivers have a story about it than almost anywhere else. It's not a haunted road. It's what any long, empty highway does to a tired mind. I-40 is just where the most people have noticed. So next time you're barreling down I-40 at 2 a.m. and you catch something out the corner of your eye, before you decide it's something else, remember, it's probably just what 16 hours awake and 300 miles of empty desert does to anybody. If you're a driver and you've run this stretch, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Drop it in the comments. I want to hear the version nobody else will tell you. And if you want more of what actually happens out here, hit subscribe. This is just one stretch of road.